My mother-in-law ripped the scarf off my neck in front of 180 wedding guests, smiled at my scars, and said, "No wonder you look like a monster." For a moment, nobody moved. The ballroom at the Grand Hotel in Birmingham went so quiet I could hear the ice clink in somebody's glass. My blue silk scarf was lying on the polished floor between Beverly's silver heels and my own shaking hands. I reached for my neck, but it was too late. The scars ran from just below my left ear down across my collarbone and under the shoulder of my navy dress. Burn marks, shrapnel lines, old skin that never learned how to look normal again. I had spent years choosing high collars, soft scarves, careful angles in photographs, not because I was ashamed of serving. I wasn't. I had been an army medic for almost 20 years. But there are some parts of war you don't want discussed over crab cakes and champagne. Beverly tilted her head like she was admiring a cracked vase at a yard sale. "Well," she said just loud enough for the front tables to hear, "now everybody can stop wondering why she hides herself." A couple of guests gave nervous laughs. One woman actually covered her mouth, but I could see her smile through her fingers. I looked past Beverly to my husband, Mark. He was standing by the head table in his gray suit, one hand still wrapped around a glass of bourbon. His face had gone pale, but he didn't come to me. He didn't pick up my scarf. He didn't tell his mother to stop, Mark one said quietly. Beverly turned toward him like she owned the room. "Tell her not to make a scene. This is Tyler's wedding. Tyler was my stepson." I had helped raise him from 15 on through braces, breakups, college applications, and the year he thought he wanted to become a professional poker player because he won $80 at a church raffle. His bride Emily stood frozen near the cake table, her bouquet hanging at her side. Mark finally moved, but not toward me. He stepped beside his mother. "Claire," he said, keeping his voice low. "Please just go freshen up." Freshen up, like I had spilled wine on my dress, like his mother hadn't just stripped away the one thing I had asked everyone to leave alone. I bent down, picked up my scarf, and held it in my fist. My fingers wouldn't stop trembling. That was when Beverly gave a little smile, the kind she used at Sunday brunch when she'd found a new way to insult me without raising her voice. And across the ballroom, the double doors opened. My father walked in wearing a dark suit, holding a small cream envelope in his hand. He took one look at me, then he started toward the stage. My father had always taught me that the loudest person in the room wasn't necessarily the strongest one. Sometimes the strongest person was the one who stayed calm long enough to let the truth speak for itself. As I watched him walk across that ballroom, I wanted to believe everything was about to change. Instead, I turned away. I wasn't ready to face another audience. I slipped through the side doors into the hallway, clutching my scarf against my chest. The noise from the reception faded behind me until all I could hear was the hum of the air conditioner and the click of my heels on the marble floor. The ladies' room was empty. I locked myself inside the largest stall and finally let myself cry. Not loud, just enough to let the pressure out. I hadn't cried like that in years, not after Afghanistan, not after retirement. Not even after my shoulder surgeries, yet somehow one sentence from Beverly Walker had cut deeper than shrapnel ever had. "No wonder you look like a monster." I stared at the blue scarf in my hands. I'd bought it 3 years earlier at a little boutique in downtown Huntsville, soft silk navy with tiny silver flowers stitched into the corners. It wasn't expensive, but I loved it because it covered the scars without drawing attention. Most people never asked questions. That's exactly how I liked it. People often assume veterans want to tell war stories. Some do. I didn't. I spent 19 years in the U.S. Army as a combat medic. My job wasn't chasing medals, it was keeping people alive. The scars on my neck and shoulder came during my final deployment in Afghanistan. A convoy had been hit outside Kandahar. The explosion flipped the lead vehicle. I remembered smoke so thick it blocked the sun, the smell of burning fuel, someone screaming for help. Training takes over in moments like that. You stop thinking about yourself, you move. I pulled one soldier out through a shattered window, then another. The second blast caught me before I reached cover. The burns healed mostly. The skin never did, neither did some of the memories. When I retired at 41, I promised myself I wouldn't let those scars become my identity. I volunteered twice a week at the VA hospital in Huntsville. I gardened. I learned to bake sourdough bread that always came out a little too dense. Life became wonderfully ordinary. Then I married Mark. We'd met at a charity golf tournament for veterans. He was kind, patient, funny in the dry dad joke sort of way. After losing his first wife to cancer, he'd spent years raising Tyler alone. When we married, Tyler was 15. He wasn't looking for another mother. I wasn't trying to replace one. Over time, though, we found our rhythm. I helped him study for algebra. He taught me how to stream football games without accidentally buying 6 different subscriptions. By the time he graduated high school, he hugged me before walking across the stage. "Love you, Claire," he'd whispered. I still remember how proud I was. Beverly never accepted any of it. From the very beginning, she treated me like I was only a temporary visitor in her son's life. At family dinners, she'd introduce me as Mark's army wife, never Claire, never family, just the woman who happened to be there. Whenever someone complimented the meal, she'd smile politely. "Oh, Claire doesn't really cook Southern food." If someone admired our house, she'd quickly add, "Well, Mark bought it long before she came along." Each comment sounded harmless on its own. But together, they slowly wore me down. Mark always gave the same response. "That's just Mom. It's easier not to argue. She doesn't mean anything by it." I wanted to believe him. I truly did. Because when you love someone, you convince yourself their excuses make sense. Standing in that restroom, I finally wondered if I'd spent too many years protecting everyone else's peace while quietly giving away my own. Then someone knocked softly on the door. "Claire," it was Emily, her voice trembled. "Can I come in? There's something you need to know." Emily stepped inside and gently closed the restroom door behind her. Her makeup was still flawless, but it was obvious she'd been crying. A bride shouldn't look that exhausted only 30 minutes into her own reception. She glanced at the scarf in my hands before looking into my eyes. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. I managed a weak smile. "You don't owe me an apology." "Yes, I do." She leaned against the sink and folded her arms, because I saw it coming and I didn't stop it. For a moment, I didn't understand. "What do you mean?" Emily lowered her voice. "Beverly asked about your scarf while we were getting ready this morning. She kept saying she wondered what you were hiding." A cold feeling settled in my stomach. "I thought she was just being Beverly," Emily continued. "I never imagined she'd actually do something like that. Neither had I, not really. For 6 years, Beverly had insulted me in quiet, subtle ways. Backhanded compliments, little jokes, and comments that sounded harmless until you realized I was always the target. But today, she'd crossed a line I never believed she would." Emily stepped closer and gently touched my arm. "I should have warned you." I shook my head. "You couldn't have known." She looked down. "I think maybe I did." We stood there in silence for a moment. Finally, I asked, "How's Tyler?" She gave me a sad smile. Confused. That sounded exactly like him. Tyler had always hated conflict. As a teenager, he'd disappear into the garage whenever Mark and Beverly argued. He wasn't weak. He just wanted everyone to get along. I'd spent years trying to teach him that keeping the peace isn't always the same as doing what's right. Apparently, that lesson hadn't fully stayed with him. Emily took a deep breath. "You know something, if this wedding had happened 5 years ago, it probably wouldn't even be happening." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She let out a quiet laugh. "Mark almost lost everything." That wasn't completely true. He hadn't almost lost everything. He had almost lost the business. 3 years earlier, his construction company hit a rough patch after several commercial projects were canceled. Cash flow disappeared almost overnight. He didn't tell many people, not even Tyler. But I knew. I'd watched him sit at our kitchen table night after night, staring at unpaid invoices while pretending everything was fine. One evening, he finally admitted the truth. "I don't know how we're going to get through this." I still remember reaching across the table and squeezing his hand. "We'll figure it out," and we did. At least I thought we had. Quietly, I withdrew nearly $200,000 from my retirement savings, enough to keep the business alive until new contracts came in. I never asked for the money back. It wasn't a loan. He was my husband. That's what family does. A year later, when Tyler proposed to Emily, money was tight again. The venue they dreamed of was more expensive than they could afford. Emily was heartbroken when she talked about giving it up, so I wrote another check. Not because anyone asked me to, because I wanted them to begin their marriage without debt hanging over their heads. Almost nobody knew. Well, almost my father knew. He called me after I transferred the money. "Claire," he'd said, "you're generous. I love that about you." "I know," I replied. Then he said something I never forgot. "Just make sure the people you're sacrificing for would do the same for you." At the time, I answered without hesitation. They would. Standing in that restroom, I wasn't so sure anymore. Emily looked toward the ballroom doors. "Your dad just arrived." I nodded. "He was at a veterans ceremony in Montgomery this morning. He brought your wedding gift." I smiled faintly. He wouldn't have missed Tyler's wedding for anything. What do you think is inside? Emily asked. I shrugged, knowing my father, probably a handwritten letter and a savings bond. Emily almost laughed, then her smile disappeared. Before either of us could say another word, raised voices echoed down the hallway. One belonged to Beverly, the other belonged to my father. Neither sounded calm. Emily and I hurried out of the restroom. The hallway outside the ballroom was filled with nervous guests pretending they were searching for the coffee station. No one wanted to admit they were listening. Beverly's voice rang through the open doors. I don't care who he is, this is a family matter. Then my father's calm voice answered. It became my family matter the moment you humiliated my daughter. I stopped walking. Emily touched my arm. You don't have to go back in there. I do, I replied, my voice calm instead of angry. When we walked back into the ballroom, every conversation stopped. My father crossed the room, gently placed his jacket over my shoulders, covering the scars Beverly had exposed. Are you all right? He asked quietly. I nodded, though we both knew it wasn't true. Across the room, Beverly scoffed. Oh, please, we're acting like someone died. This time, nobody laughed. My father turned to Mark. I've known you for 6 years. I respected you because Claire loved you. I expected you to protect your wife. I was trying to keep the peace, Mark said. No, Dad replied calmly. You were trying to keep your mother happy. The words hit harder than shouting ever could. When Mark suggested talking later, I realized there had always been a later, and later had always become never. Just then the DJ accidentally played 2 seconds of Sweet Caroline before hurriedly muting it, briefly breaking the tension. Dad apologized to Tyler and Emily, then lifted a cream-colored envelope. I think it's time everyone learned who Claire really is. Before opening it, he looked at me. Is this what you want? I don't want revenge, I said. I want the truth. Emily suddenly stepped forward. I recorded something this morning. She played a recording from the bridal suite. Everyone heard Beverly saying she planned to pull off my scarf so everyone would see my scars. Then Mark's voice followed, just don't ruin the whole night. Silence filled the room. I didn't think she'd actually do it, Mark whispered. You knew enough to warn her, Emily replied. Tyler stared at his father in disbelief. You planned this. Dad finally opened the envelope. He revealed my Purple Heart citation and explained how I had been injured while rescuing 2 soldiers during my final deployment. He read a heartfelt thank you letter from one soldier's wife, leaving the room completely silent. Then he revealed another truth. Years earlier, I had secretly given Tyler and Emily $150,000 to help buy their first home, asking only that they never feel obligated to repay me. Tyler hugged me through tears. Why didn't you tell me? Because gifts aren't supposed to come with receipts. Dad then revealed I had also withdrawn nearly $200,000 from my retirement savings to save Mark's construction company. Mark quietly admitted, I failed you. You expected me to forgive everything, I answered. What I needed was a husband who stood beside me. Tyler looked at his father. You always taught me to protect my family, so why was Grandma the only one you protected? Mark had no answer. The reception continued, but everything had changed. Months later, our divorce was finalized peacefully. I found peace volunteering at the VA hospital and rebuilding my life. 6 months after the wedding, I visited Tyler and Emily's home for a simple backyard barbecue. Tyler raised his glass. Claire didn't just help us buy this house. She showed us what real family looks like. I smiled, removed the blue silk scarf that had once hidden my scars, and tied it to the handle of a rocking chair instead of wearing it. I don't need to hide anymore. That scarf had once been my shield, now it was only a piece of silk. Sometimes healing isn't about watching someone else lose. It's about realizing they no longer have the power to define who you are.